Hey there, welcome back to the channel and Happy New Year. In the spirit of the new year, I wanted to talk about how to set New Year's goals as a developer. The reason this is on my mind is that I usually start the year with a list of tech I want to learn or projects I want to build or content I want to create. And if I'm being honest, those things don't always happen. So I've been reflecting on what has worked for me and what hasn't, and I wanted to share that with you now. So I've got 4 strategies that I've found have been really effective for me in helping me to meet the goals that I've set for myself and in doing the things that I've said I wanted to do in any given year. So let's get into those. So my first piece of advice I think is probably the most powerful that I found, and that is to have a project in mind that you want to build. I first realized this in relation to the coding realm and learning technology, but I think it really could apply for anything. And the basic idea here is that people who have a project that they're excited to build always, in my experience, end up doing better than people that are just checking a box and going through some kind of curriculum because they feel like they have to. So let's use a technology example first. Let's say that you want to learn Golang. It would help to have a project in mind and to use Golang to build that rather than to go through some course and follow along, typing along. I think when you have to actually put something into use, number one, the concepts stick better. And number two, it's just more fun. You end up being more motivated to keep going. And you're essentially waiting to put that knowledge into use when you're just going through a course first. So it's basically more fun and more effective to have a project. Let's use another example. So I'm learning SEO this year and I have a course and it's a very well-regarded course. But one thing I'm gonna do is to start putting it into use here on YouTube. YouTube is basically a big search engine. So I think I can start applying some of those concepts right now instead of basically watching hours of curriculum and kind of waiting. I find that to be really boring and it basically feels like a huge chore that you have to do before you actually get to start having fun, and nobody likes that. Another quick example from my life just to drive things home. So I got a MIDI keyboard for Christmas in order to produce music, and I'm gonna take a course next month with the musician Blanks, but before then I want to kind of get comfortable with things. And so one approach I could take is watch a bunch of tutorials, do a bunch of reading of the documentation and figure out how stuff works, and then start creating music. Or I could just dive in and just figure it out as I go, look up things as I need to find them, and really start doing the thing as soon as possible. And that's what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna take that second approach, just dive in, just figure stuff out and not feel like I have to have it all figured out before I start doing whatever the thing is. There's a guy named Scott Young who has a blog post along these lines. It's called Do the Real Thing, which basically says that there's a lot of ways of avoiding doing the actual work that you say you want to do. So if you say you want to learn French, for example, it's a lot easier to play with language learning apps than to try and speak the language with a real person. And so in general, I think the better path is to try and do the real thing. And that pertains to technology as well, or really anything else you want to learn. So my point here is have a project and do the real thing, and I think you'll go really far this year. Okay, my second piece of advice for meeting your goals this year is to have stakes. And this could look a variety of ways. So let's say you took my advice from the last point and you decided you want to have a project to build. Maybe that project is actually at work, and then you actually have to do that project because it's part of your job and you're under some kind of pressure. I think that's good. That is an example of stakes. Another way of creating stakes for yourself, maybe a little bit more artificially if you need some structure and a push, is to just tell people, hey, I'm building this thing and I'm gonna have it ready by this date. That's a great way to force yourself to actually get stuff done. Another variation on this is building in public. So maybe get a Twitter account if you don't have one and say, hey, I'm building this thing, and maybe live tweet as you go. People will start to pay attention, and then they might start to ask, hey, where's that thing? If you start to fall off the wagon a little bit. And so social pressure is just very powerful. So any way you can bake that in, I think is going to be a really helpful form of stakes. There are other forms of stakes as well. So there's actually monetary stakes. And so there are apps out there that you basically put money on the line and you say, if I don't do X thing by X date, then this money is going to go to some cause that I don't support, like another political party or something like that. So there's an app called Stick with 2 Ks that I know is pretty well known for doing this kind of thing. The point is that you need some combination, I think, of social pressure, structure, and fear. And those are all very powerful things. And when you combine those together, they create stakes that are super motivating. So regardless, the point is to try and find a way to bake some kind of stakes into your goal process. My third piece of advice is to have a system. So it's easy for me to use examples from my own life, so I'll just talk about myself here. This was me on YouTube last year. So in 2020, I wanted to make one video a week and I completely failed on it. I think I only uploaded 20 videos or so in 2020, and the process was very difficult. Sitting down, shooting like I am right now, and then editing the videos, doing that on a week in, week out basis while also keeping up with my other commitments, it ended up being too much. And so in 2021, I created a system, and a huge part of that was hiring a video editor. So one reason this worked is just the structure of it, right? So I knew that because we'd agreed on shooting 2 videos a week, I had to sit down and do this at least twice a week, or my editor wouldn't have any work to do. So there's a certain kind of external pressure there, similar to stakes like I just talked about, but this is a little bit different. And in addition, I had to create a system to support this accountability. So I had to be more intentional about brainstorming ideas. I had to get a little bit more of a schedule in place. I had to have a vision for what I wanted to create. And so the system came together to support the fact that I had an editor, and we had to kind of keep the content train running week in, week out. And of course, part of the system was me not actually doing the editing myself anymore, and that freed up time to do all these other things to kind of beef up the system and to have a little bit more structure and intentionality in the whole enterprise. So this could look a lot of different ways for you. It could look like having a schedule. It could look like having some kind of forcing function, like working with somebody that's a freelancer. It could look like automation and using Zapier and creating automations that take care of a lot of your workflow for you. The point is that you don't want your goals and what you achieve to be totally reliant upon your willpower in any given moment. Because if I'm being honest, there are times where I don't feel like sitting down and shooting these videos, but if I didn't shoot every time I didn't feel like it, then nothing would ever get done. And so I think the structure of that system is really important in helping you get where you want to go. And my fourth piece of advice is to reward yourself. So Atomic Habits by James Clear is kind of the canonical habits book, and I won't rehash it all here for you, but he talks about making habits obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. And so I wanted to focus a little bit on satisfying. Basically, the point with satisfying is that in order to get a habit to stick, you have to feel immediately successful. So to any extent that you can bake in some kind of reward or setting a really low bar, that's going to be massively motivating. So in the book, he talks about somebody that wants to go to the gym. Instead of starting with some big goal like go to the gym and do all these reps, the initial goal is just set my clothes out. And then you go from set my clothes out to put my clothes on, and from put my clothes on to get in the car. And then basically once you're already in your clothes and in the car, you might as well go to the gym, right? And so you start with these small goals, these low bars, and you feel immediately successful. You get the reward of doing the thing, even if it's not to the fullest extent that you planned on in the beginning. And then that's how you build a habit. That's how you make something stick. There's other ways to bake rewards in, of course. So if I wanted, for example, after this, I'm recording this in the morning so I could go out and get breakfast to reward myself. That's just an example. You can figure out ways to bake in things that you like as a reward for doing the things that you said you wanted to do. All right, so those are 4 of my best pieces of advice for meeting your goals this year as a developer. I hope this was helpful. If you're still here, you'd probably like the rest of my channel, which focuses on software engineering and self-employment, so consider subscribing. Regardless, thanks so much for watching. Remember, stay hungry, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.